Among the objects from the tomb of Tutankhamun is a gold-covered shrine with panels showing reliefs of the king and queen in various pursuits, which are really rather more domestic than religious. She ties a necklace around his neck, or points out the quarry to his unerring bow, and he pours perfume into her hand. The doors have been opened after the bolts have been shot back, and we should be able to see the god within. But unfortunately, in this case, it happens to be missing. The thieves who ransacked the tomb soon after it was first sealed up took a liking to it and removed it together with a lot of other portable gold work. But it undoubtedly was of Tutankhamun, as the inscription on the back pillar makes plain. He, in fact, was the god within the shrine. And this is hardly surprising, since, like every other pharaoh, he was a god incarnate.
This was not the only shrine in the tomb. Others enclosed images of the gods, and this great gilded example surrounded the canopic chest, which contained the embalmed viscera, or internal organs of the king. It was protected by the goddesses of the north, south, east, and west, each carved with the features of Queen Ankhesenamun, Tutankhamun's wife. The four most notable shrines were those made of wood covered with stucco modelled in relief and gilded. They were erected around the stone sarcophagus of the king, nesting one within the other. The walls, ceiling, and doors of these shrines were decorated with figures of the gods of the underworld, texts from the sacred books, and magic emblems. Fortunately, in the case of these large shrines, the image of the god within was not missing. It proved to be the incarnation of Osiris, the god of terrestrial fertility, the subterranean waters, the new springing corn, the god of death and resurrection. In other words, the mummified Tutankhamun himself. He is wearing the long plaited beard, which shows he is now an immortal. The walls of these shrines are made with a slight slope, a translation into wood of a flimsy reed hut. Since prehistoric times, the Egyptian farmer has built such light shelters for himself and his beasts. The cavetto cornices are incised with a pattern of fronds, like the feathery tops of plants, and the edges where two walls meet are reinforced with a bound roll of stalks. Here, in essence, is the Egyptian temple, where the god lived as he had done from primeval times since his first appearance at the creation of the world. For the Egyptian name for temple means the house of God. All temples were built by kings, who were the intermediaries between men and gods. The pharaoh kings are often shown as the sons of the god engaging in the foundation ceremonies. Pegging out the site, usually assisted by the goddess of measurement, Sheshat. Cutting the first clod of earth. Pouring sand into the foundation trench. Molding bricks and offering them to the god of the temple. Like the Christian churches of the Middle Ages, the ancient Egyptian temples are built on a uniform plan, however much they may vary in detail. The approach is along an avenue of sphinxes, a composite beast with the body of a lion and the head of the reigning king. The lion was a protector of thresholds and had the role of repulsing evil in whatever form it might come. The main entry is through a great gateway or pylon. This huge structure at Edfu is higher and wider than the facade of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. It bars access to the inner courts, except to those privileged to enter. All such gateways show figures of the pharaoh repelling evil from the temple by slaughtering the wicked foes of Egypt. This he does before the supreme god of Upper and Lower Egypt. On the southern tower, the king wears the white crown of Upper Egypt. On the northern, the red crown of Lower Egypt, such as the last great native pharaoh Ramesses III wears here at Medinet Habu. Before the pylon stood colossal statues of the king, and sometimes obelisks, as at the Temple of Luxor. Originally there were two, but the companion obelisk was removed to Paris by the French in 1836, and now stands in the Place de la Concorde. The outer walls of the temple are also decorated with reliefs showing the pharaoh smiting his enemies or hunting the evil animals of the wild. At Medinet Habu, Ramesses III, mounted in his chariot, kills the animals of the desert. Wild cattle are captured by the banks of a stream. These warlike scenes seem at first sight unsuitable for the decoration of a sacred place, but their purpose was strictly practical. They have the magic function of driving away evil from the holy precincts. The roof of the temple might be attacked by one of the rainstorms that break over the desert about once every 20 years. This was regarded as an onslaught by hostile forces which would cause great havoc unless special measures were taken. Channels were cut to lead off the storm water, so that it could pass through spouts in the form of the guardian lion. Each was inscribed with a magic text to render the attack harmless. These are the forerunners of the medieval gargoyles that spouted rainwater clear of the foundations. In ancient times, the gateways were closed by huge doors of wood covered with gold or bronze and inlaid with colored stones. These gave access to the first court, which is colonnaded and open to the sunlight. some temples, such courts have colossal statues of the pharaoh and usually an altar, as in the Temple of Luxor. The first court of the Temple of Ramesses III at Medinet Habu also has statues of the king wearing elaborate crowns and the costume of the living. An unnamed queen stands beside him. At Edfu, the colonnade has survived virtually intact. Here there are no colossi of the pharaoh. Instead, granite statues of the falcon deity Horus, the inhabitant of the temple, are placed at the entrance to the Great Hall. A seated colossus is placed on each side of the doorway at Luxor. The great hall of these temples was a hypostyle hall. That means its ceiling was upheld by a forest of columns. And remember, these buildings were constructed about 1,000 years before the Greeks built the Parthenon. At Karnak, the ceiling slabs have long since disappeared from the architraves, and the hall is now open to the sky. Originally, only a series of windows in a taller colonnade down the center of this hall admitted the daylight. At Dendera, where the roof still survives, the light is much less intense. Even so, it is possible to see that the ceiling is painted blue to represent the sky, and carved with figures in boats. These represent the stars and other celestial beings. The columns themselves are usually in vegetable form: papyrus, lotus, or palm tree, or later of composite type. Near the floor, the walls are decorated with figures of the Nile goddesses and gods bringing offerings on trays. At this level also, water plants are often depicted. This hall, in fact, represents the universe springing to life out of the primeval marsh, with the columns supporting the heavens. The reliefs that decorate the walls here, in contrast to those outside the temple, are of peaceful scenes. The king makes offerings to the god or performs holy rites at the various festivals. The hypostyle hall leads to another similar hall, and this in turn to the Holy of Holies, a shrine in the form we've already seen in the shrines from the tomb of Tutankhamun. We are now in the total obscurity of primeval night. Here the god lived self-contained, like a great man on his estate. Every day before the first light, preparations were made for the morning service. The musicians assembled. Flowers were picked. Food offerings, geese, grapes, and bread were prepared. The libation vessels were filled with consecrated water. Priests who had purified themselves carried shrines. They held torches to light their way and censers to purify the offerings. As the sun rose, the chief priest opens the doors of the Holy of Holies to show the God within. He falls on his knees to adore the god. Here the part of the chief priest is taken by the king, while the god worshipped is Osiris, supported by his wife Isis. Incense is then burnt to perfume the air that the god breathes. Food and wine are placed on an altar before the emblem of the god. A precious stone jar is opened, and the forehead of the god is anointed with holy oil. Life-giving water is poured from a golden vessel in the shape of an ankh, the symbol of life. Incense is again burnt, this time in a long-handled censer. The last rite is to veil the image of the god before closing and sealing the door. The morning service is over. So from day to day the god lived within his house, waited on by his servants, the priests, protected by a stout boundary wall. Here were the various parts of his domain: the fowl runs, the stockyards, the gardens where all the food, flowers, and vegetables used in the various services were raised. And the pure water required for the libations was taken from these lakes and wells. So, in his temple, or house on earth, the god dwelt secure, as the Egyptians believed he had done from the moment of the world's creation.